Hi guys, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be talking about two cameras today. We've got the R6 and we've also got the 1DX Mark II. Now the point of this video is to talk through the specs and features of both cameras. On the second-hand market, a good one of these is around 1500 quid. A good one of these is about 1650, 1700 quid. So should you now, at this point, give up with the 1D sort of range, the mirrorless, the DSLR range, and move over to mirrorless and go with the R6. So look at the specs of both cameras. I'll show you some imagery from both cameras and then let you know my feelings on the pros and cons of each and why I run both a mirrorless camera and a DSLR camera when I'm out in the field. So first of all, let's head over to the specs of the cameras and then we'll go from there. Okay, so here we have both cameras. We've got the R6 and the 1DX Mark II. As you can tell straight out of the box, the 1DX Mark II is a bigger camera. Obviously my R6 has the built-in grip add-on on here, which does make it a little bit bigger, gives me a bit of extra room when I'm holding the camera, and obviously the extra shooting points down here. I've got more buttons in the front, which to be honest I've never really ever used these buttons anyway, so that makes no difference to me at all. Both got a fairly large full-frame sensor on there, which is really nice to see. You get pretty much the same on each one. They're 20 megapixels each. Use a very similar sensor point inside of there. The main difference you're going to find is, say, mainly on the side, and it's a lot of differences along the back. Now obviously on DSLR it's very much old school. You've got your mechanical viewfinder rather than a digital viewfinder. You've got your LCD screen here, but you've got the flip out vari-angle touchscreen on the R6. Both do 4K 60 on video, but if you want to do video on one of these cameras, 100% go for the R6. It's way better with the eye tracking and everything. This has got eye tracking, but this system is way better. As for other functions on here, ISO up to 51,200 instead of 106,000 on the R6, so this is going to be better at low light. On shooting side of things, you get 14 frames a second on mechanical, 14 frames a second on mechanical. On electronic, you get 16 frames a second, you get 20. On this camera, I'm going to primarily use it on mirrorless mode, not just because it's got 20 frames a second, but also because you get a lot of blackout on the mechanical mode in this one, which you definitely do not get on this one here. So it was really weird when I first used this on the mechanical shutter mode, because it was very disconcerting seeing the animal come towards you running and you're missing parts of what's coming towards you, which you don't ever get. Never ever noticed on a DSLR or even on the R7 in fact, so very strange on that point there. Both have dual memory card slots. This used 2 CF, so 1 CF and 1 CFast on here, and then you get 2 of the super fast SD cards in the R6 itself. But overall, both very similar cameras in their actual specifications, obviously full frame and everything, but a lot better video functions obviously with the R6. So out of the two, if you do more video stuff, for sure go for this. If you want pure horsepower and frame second, again the R6. If you want something slightly more robust, a little bit harder wearing built wise, then go with 1DX. And if you don't mind sort of limiting your lens choice to sort of more second-hand stuff or older kit, then go with the 1DX Mark II there. But it's enough looking at the cameras themselves here. Let's now head our way over and look at the images that you can get from these cameras themselves. Okay, so the first image we're going to look at here is taken on the R6, and same with the second image as well. This is a dog. I've got it running towards me to practice the tracking, and I have mentioned this in the overview I've done of the R6, that this is in electronic mode. Focusing was absolutely perfect and it tracked it to a point, but as soon as it got too close, the focus went a little bit crazy and it didn't pick up the dog anymore. It picked up like its tail or something instead. And I think this is more because the age of lens I'm using. So one thing to think about is if you're using EF glass with a mirrorless camera, if it's old EF glass, it's not going to focus as quickly, so you are going to have to be very wary of that, and potentially you may miss some faster objects coming towards you as they get closer, because the lens can't keep up with the raw horsepower of the camera itself. But overall, this is the middle of the range, perfectly decent shot, fully in focus where I want it to be, tracked on the eye even though it's a dark eye, and worked absolutely fine, so no issues there at all. Second photo is again on the R6. This is a snake. The reason I've done the snake is because I've got a very similar image with the same lens of the 1DX Mark II as well, which we'll show you in a second. But you can see, focused on the eye, use the AF functionality for this to get it tracked on. 2.8, it's a super shadow focus, very low light. I think I was very much almost maxed out on ISO, and looks a very clean image that we've got from it, which is really nice to see. I say no problems at all with the focus working in low light from what we can see with this image here. Next image is the first one from the 1DX Mark II. This is a leopard walking towards me. Again, using the exact same lens I used with the dog, which is why I picked this image here. This is through glass, perfectly in focus, leopard walking towards me, tracked on the eyes, and tracked all the way through right up until it pretty much got to the minimum focus distance of the lens, and that's why I started getting out of focus photos rather than the camera not being keep up. So this is a very old, like Mark I 300mm lens, and it tracked it absolutely fine, so no worries at all using that EF lens with that camera. Perfectly sharp image, a little bit of low light, and it looks absolutely usable, so I'm happy with that one. Final image we're going to look at here is the second one of the snake take on the 1DX Mark II. Same lens, 100mm macro, f2.8, focused on the right hand side of the eye there. Perfectly sharp, so you can see it's 2.8 because the nose is out of focus, but the eye is absolutely where it needs to be. Again, very low light, same light conditions as the R6 snake image, and a very usable image. So both cameras showing that full frame, low light, perfect, doesn't matter at all. Should have no problems at all using either one of these cameras in low light. So there's the imagery and the specs of both cameras. Let's go over a few reasons why I personally run one of each at the moment and don't just run two DSLRs or run two mirrorless cameras. There are some things that I feel that DSLR, for the photography that I use and do, is still better at. I still think, for me, a very niche use case that some people have brought up is I shoot at zoos quite a lot, and I shoot through glass, and yes, Canon do not make their cameras to shoot through glass, but I do, because I have to when I go to zoos, and the accuracy and the autofocus on a DSLR, in my opinion, is still better and more accurate than the autofocusing you get from a mirrorless camera. But the autofocusing system on a mirrorless camera is better if you're not shooting through glass and in the wild, and you can lock on that eye and track the object coming towards you. So there's the pros and cons there. If I'm shooting through glass, I always pick up my 1DX and use that. This is why this tends to have the 300mm on it most of the time, because that's the lens that I will tend to use shooting through glass. The animal's going to be a little bit closer, and I'll put the 500mm on my mirrorless camera and run that, because I'm more likely to shoot something that's out in the field or through wire with that camera. So that's why I use one of each mainly. Another thing to consider is waterproofing and body feel. This is a heavier camera for sure, but it is better built in my opinion than a mirrorless camera. It feels solid, it feels like you could throw it. I've dropped my 1DX several times, and I've had that 5 years and it's still working absolutely fine. I would worry if I dropped a mirrorless camera like the R7 or the R6, just because it doesn't, even though it's a magnesium body in the R6, it doesn't feel as robust, is probably the correct wording, as the 1DX. Also, it's not so bad in the R6, but I had a lot of problems with the R7 with buffer. If you're shooting raw and you're shooting redundant like I do, you get way more of a buffer with the DSLRs. They're not having to move as many pixels around. Like the R7 is 36 megapixels, this is nowhere near that. So you physically don't have to move as much data, but it being full frame, which is why I ended up buying an R6, because I wanted to run full frame on both cameras, and also have a bit more experience with a proper Canon mirrorless battery grip and see what they're like compared to the custom one that I'm making with the R7. So there are a few of the main reasons why I still run both cameras. At some point, of course, I'm going to have to go to mirrorless for both cameras, because Canon don't make DSLRs at this level anymore. They still sell the 1DX Mark III, but they're not going to make anymore. So at some point, even when I do upgrade this to a Mark III, I'm going to then have to look at that point going R1, R3 or something. I do plan to try and get an R3 at some point, because I'd love to test an R3 against the 1DX range, and if I get a Mark III, it'd be perfect to sort of go against that. But I'd also like to try what the sort of more pro feel mirrorless is like. So either I'll rent one or I'll buy one at some point and use that, and look forward to using that as well, because it's a camera that looks really good. I think the L1 is going to be a little bit out of reach. I think it's going to be about £6,500, £7,500 in the UK, which is going to be way too far out of my reach. I'd rather spend that extra money on some nice glass, and maybe get some RF glass. So at the moment, all I'm using is EF glass, which is another reason why I'm using two, is because all my glass is EF glass, and I only have one converter. So at the moment, I can only use one camera and one lens. So I have to bring a secondary DSLR, but I still would have a DSLR at the moment anyway, for the reasons I've given. So out of the two, obviously if you want to go future proofing, go with a mirrorless. And if you're not shooting through glass a lot, go with a mirrorless. You can get the newer lenses. It's going to be supported for much longer than getting something like a 1DX. But if you've got EF glass and you want something that's absolutely bomb-proof and feels pro, go with the 1DX Mark II all day long. It's a dream camera of mine to own. I'm glad I've got one now, because it is absolutely incredible and everything I thought it would be. So really enjoying owning it and really enjoying using it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe, comment and like, and I will catch you guys in the next one, which we're going to be looking at the 1D Mark III on retro review. So if you want to see that, look out for the video next week, hit the subscribe button, I'll catch you next week. Cheers.